Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Office Timeline Quick Start webinar. Today we're going to be going through some of those startup features and functionality of Office Timeline, as well as some tips and tricks to help you along your way when you are creating your first timelines. Before we dive into the actual presentation itself, let's go through a little bit of housekeeping and some agenda before we get right into it. So first up, folks, we are using Zoom to manage this session. If you have any questions, you of course can use that Q&A function down there at the bottom. You have your audio settings over to the left. If you need to, adjust your speakers or headsets to make sure you can see and hear. So the main point here is just to let you know that we'd like to keep it interactive. We'd love to hear your questions, so feel free to throw those in at any time, and one of my colleagues will answer those live there in the Q&A. Next, a little bit about our agenda. We should take 30 minutes or so, might go a little bit over, but we will see how we do. We're going to go through some overview stuff. That's where we are right now. Then we're going to get into some real-world timelines that some of our customers have created that we think are great examples for you folks. Then we will dive into a demonstration itself. We'll look at, creating line-by-line tasks and milestones, using copy and paste, importing data using Office Timeline and refreshing that data. And we'll also talk a little bit about templates and styling. We'll get through all of that in the demo. And then, of course, at the end, we'll do a little bit of a recap as well as share some resources for you folks to continue your learning after this session. So really quick, up at the top, I'd like to answer that burning question of, what is Office Timeline? If you're new to Office Timeline, it's pretty simple. Office Timeline is a PowerPoint add-in that allows you to take some of that complex project data that we're working with, whether it's in Excel or MS Project or somewhere else, take that complex data and turn it into, boardroom-ready presentations or pretty clear images that your, executives or your stakeholders in your project can easily digest and be impressed by. So essentially, we want to do what it says there in that box, and that is to save some time for you, improve your communication when you're presenting, the milestones and highlights of your projects, and of course, impress your audiences with your amazing presentations. So included in those amazing presentations are some of these real-world timelines that I was mentioning before, created by our customers. First one here, pretty simple. Has some of the essential building blocks, I would say, of a timeline. I'll kind of point at things with my cursor here. Of course, we have our time scale. We have our milestones sprinkled throughout up at the top, attached to our time scale. And then down below that, we have some tasks. And we even have some milestones attached to one of our tasks here. And that's pretty much it, simple, clean, clear, just highlighting some of the other elements that you're seeing on the slide, like this table here, or this executive summary, or even, some of these things up here, like the title. These are just PowerPoint Microsoft objects that we're using to add into our slide and add a little bit of color, to the presentation in addition to our timeline. Another cool example here using our light plan. As you can see, time scale at the bottom, milestones sprinkled throughout, and then up the top, we're kind of getting creative in the way that we're organizing these tasks, kind of bucketing them into System 1 and System 2. And then we're even attaching some milestones to those tasks specifically. And again, just a very clear, very simple timeline with some of these like legends and bullets that we're adding in, to complement the timeline. This next example, I would say, has a lot more going on, a little bit more complex data we're working with here. You'll notice at the top, we're using a multiple time scale. So in this case, we are showing quarters and years. Down below, we have our swim lanes. So in this case, we're organizing our tasks into their respective swim lanes there, color coding them, and there's a good amount of tasks per swim lane. So a lot more going on, but in my opinion, still very clear, very legible timeline here, kind of giving us a snapshot of this project. Again, I do have to highlight some of these additional objects that we have added here. These are just tables that have either been drawn in PowerPoint or copy and pasted in from Excel, etc. This is not technically associated directly with the timeline itself, just added in to add a little color and flair. This timeline was created using our plus plan. Same goes for this one here using our plus plan. Again, notice that we have the multiple timescales. In this case, we're using the maximum, which is 3. And we have swim lanes and sub-swim lanes in this case. And we're kind of using a blend of everything, right? We have swim lanes with sub-swim lanes, some swim lanes without. We have tasks, milestones. We're making use of our dependency connectors, as you can see here, even following it all the way down to this highlighted red task and line displaying our critical path. So again, using our plus plan, using some of those more advanced features. And then along those lines, this is a timeline that was created in Expert. You'll notice a couple additional things. In addition to using the triple time band, the sub-swim lanes, the dependency connectors, you'll notice that we have some green bars, some red bars, and some plus and minus days underneath some of these tasks. That's using our planned versus actual functionality. This allows you to kind of visualize any advances or delays in your tasks and milestones, and those negative and positive days that you're seeing under those tasks. That is using our display of variance, so that you can actually show the exact variance on your slide, and we'll demonstrate that in a little bit. And then in this last example here, again using our expert, but we're using expert because of the span of features. We're using multiple time bands, sub-swim lanes, dependencies, but most importantly, we're making use of that plan versus actual there in the sub-swim lane outline. But really what's going on here, if you notice, we're using a lot of really cool and creative colors, orange, purple, light blue. This is indicative of another expert feature where this customer is using our custom templates, our custom themes in order to, make all of these things just the way they want them, milestone shapes, colors, outlines, fonts, and everything like that. But they're able to save that. So in the future, all of those settings, they can reuse them for other timelines. And we'll show that as well in the demonstration. All right, before we dive into the product itself, I just want to highlight some of the main areas of function that you're going to be using a lot, and the process for creating a timeline. First, let's talk about the 3 areas of use. When you are in your Office Timeline tab, you're going to have all the bells and whistles in there, but the 3 areas that you're going to be working in the most are going to be Edit Timeline, Edit Data, and the Style pane. And so quick overview of those areas. The edit timeline space, this is where I do a lot of my work because I like to work in the visual. This is where you can edit tasks, move them, move elements, extend dates, connect to dependencies, all using our drag and drop environment. Then there's also the Edit Data tab. This is where you can, edit your data in more of like a list view format, maybe a little bit more similar than what it looks like in your data or in MS Project or Excel. And then you have the style pane. Once everything is created, your layout is set, your data is connected, etc., then you'll have the opportunity to just go wild in customization and, select things like your milestone and change shapes, colors, outlines, fonts, positions, things like that using the style pane. And quick high-level overview of the process for creating a timeline. In some way or another, you're bringing project data into Office Timeline, right? So whether you're doing it from scratch and typing it directly in, or more efficiently importing the data from Excel, Project, Smartsheet, etc., then you're adjusting the layout. You're making changes to your rows, maybe placing a milestone or 2 in certain positions using that drag and drop functionality. Then you're going to style things, either set it to one of your custom themes or go through and individually set those styles for the first time. And then when things change in your project data, you can use the function of refreshing your data to make sure that all those changes are then reflected in the slide. Okay, great. Next, we're going to jump into an actual demo of the product itself, but just a good time to give you a reminder that if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and one of my colleagues will answer you live during the webinar. All right, jumping over to our demonstration, I'm just going to grab a blank PowerPoint file here. And the first place I'm going to direct your attention to is your PowerPoint ribbon up at the top. That's where all of your tabs are that you navigate through PowerPoint. And up there you'll find your Office Timeline tab. Mine says Expert, but yours of course will say whatever plan that you have. And that will open you up to the wide world of Office Timeline with all the buttons and functions and the areas of use that you're going to be spending your time. For right now, well, let's go ahead and start by clicking the New button right over here in the top left. That's going to open up our timeline wizard. This kind of acts as a springboard into what you're going to be doing next. How are you going to be creating your timeline or managing your timeline? For example, you can start from scratch where you might start typing in line by line or adding objects one by one using our drag and drop environment, or you can create from theme where again you can kind of start from scratch, but some of the styling options like color, outline, font, those things have already been chosen, and you get a library of themes that you can choose from. And moving on from there, you can also create from a template. So similar to creating from theme, some of these options, styling options have been pre-selected, but also some dummy data is included in that to give you a place that you can start from and work around and build your timeline around those templates. And then lastly, you have the ability to create a new timeline by importing your data either from Excel or Smartsheet or Project or wherever. And you would click that button just to walk through the process. A couple other things about the new timeline wizard is just notice that we have, of course, a themes library that you can choose from. You also have the ability to, create your own custom themes and share with your colleagues if you have the expert plan. Same goes for templates. We have swim lane templates, timeline templates, an entire library, including planned versus actual templates. For our demonstration today, I'm going to go ahead and choose a template for our first timeline. And this just kind of will give us a feel for creating a timeline when you don't have any data, using one of these templates and building your own customizations around it and turning it into the timeline that you might need. So I'm just going to choose one of our more basic timeline templates down here, give that a click. It's going to give me a little preview of what the timeline is going to look like with that dummy data, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click Create Timeline. That, of course, is going to dump me into the Edit Data tab. That's one of those 3 areas of use that I mentioned before, where you can view all of your tasks and milestones kind of in a list or grid view. You can assign things to be tasks or milestones, adjust the start and end dates. There's a column here for duration, percentage complete, predecessors if you're using dependencies, and you can even add hours and minutes as well if your timeline is going to be displayed in hours and minutes. I like to work in the visual environment, so I'm going to go to that other area of use that I mentioned earlier in the Edit Data tab. And right here, what I can do is use the drag and drop environment to start to customize this template and turn it into a timeline, that I would need. So for example, right away, any of these items you can click into and title them, so you can start retitling these milestones or put beautiful little typos like I did just there. I won't bore you with titling everything. And then of course you can use the drag and drop to grab a milestone and move it up and down the time scale. And then you'll notice that a couple of important things are happening when I'm doing this. Of course, Office Timeline is kind of giving you some guidelines and making the date very big so you can see very easily what you're grabbing and moving. But you'll notice that the date is changing as I'm moving it. The title is going along with it. The date is going along with it. So it kind of just makes grabbing one object in Office Timeline and moving it around pretty easy. Moving down from there, you have your timescale itself, which you can grab and move up and down your slide. The white background here, of course, is representative of your PowerPoint slide. So you can move that around. You can also adjust the size of your timescale from the right to the left. So if you want to make some room on your slide for tables or legends or any other images that you might want. Down from there, of course, you have your tasks. So you can course, use our drag and drop to move these around the time scale. And like I mentioned before, the date, the title, the duration are moving along with it. You'll notice that I can adjust the start and end dates of tasks by grabbing one end of each of these. If I drag something over to the edge of the time scale, you'll notice that it automatically adjusts to accommodate. Right, perfect. And of course, just like any of the other items here, you can click into them and title them, of course, and start to build it out and adjust the dates in the way that you need it. Couple other things to mention when it comes to drag and drop. You'll notice that your milestones kind of stick up here to the time scale. That's where they will be unless you have swim lanes and you want to put your milestones into those swim lanes. But you can grab milestones and drag them down to, say, attach to a task. And then you'll notice that when you move that task around, again, all of those things are going along with it. In this case, it's quite a few things: date, duration, title, milestone title, milestone date. And then you'll notice that even the milestone date adjusts accordingly along with this task as I drag and drop it. Now you can also add additional elements here very quickly and easily in the drag and drop environment by using these action items up here at the top. So I can click this action button here for a task and just quickly add a couple tasks. I can add a couple milestones up there at the top on the time scale. I can begin to add swim lanes, sub swim lanes, and you'll notice that you just have to click the swim lane to select it and add some of those things there. We're kind of running out of space, but don't worry. What we're going to do is take some of these tasks and other objects and bring them down into our swim lane. And what we're kind of doing here is taking what we had, a very simple, kind of timeline, simple kind of timeline, and kind of making it a little bit more complex with, swim lanes and other elements. Add some of these here, maybe drop this down into the swim lane. Perfect. We can leave this one here. Looking back up to the action items up at the top, if there's something that you like and want another one, like a task or a milestone, you could just click it and hit duplicate. If there's something that you do not want to see in your timeline, but it's still part of the data and you still want it to be in there, you can simply click something and click hide. You can do this for any element like milestones or even swim lanes. And then, of course, don't worry, it's not gone forever. You can go to the Edit Data tab, and then you'll notice that it's still there, and it's just kind of grayed out, and you have this little eyeball icon here that you can click to bring it back. Also a good time to point out that now that I'm back in the Edit Data tab, you can see that all of the adjustments that we were making in Edit Timeline are now visible here, right? We have those swim lanes that we didn't title, we have a couple extra tasks and milestones, etc. Jumping back to the drag and drop environment, if there's anything that you don't want at all, you can just simply click it and delete it. Just like that. And then, okay, great. We have kind of a pretty good looking timeline here that we've built just out of this template. A couple other things to point out in the drag and drop environment is that if you go all the way over here to the right side of the Edit Timeline window and the Edit Data tab as well, you'll find the Advanced Tools. Give that a click. And this is where you can enable features like Plan versus Actual, dependencies, and critical path. I'll come back to Plan versus Actual, but you'll notice that dependencies is already turned on for me. So that means that down here in the drag and drop, I can simply click a task or a milestone, and you'll see that you have these little black icons on either side. Those are the connectors for dependencies. And as you can see, you can simply just click those and draw them along, even from milestones. You can do start to finish, start to finish to start to start, or any variation thereof, and make those connectors and make the dependency determination. And then you'll notice that when you go to Edit Data, you'll start to see values being represented here in the predecessor column for all of those dependency connections that we've made. Cool. So we've done a good bit of building around in this template, took a template and made it something our own. Last step, of course, is just go ahead and click the green Create button down at the bottom. And then that's going to take all of those things that we did and render it into PowerPoint and create our slide for us. So right here, I want to pause and give kind of a little bit of a tip and a warning. If you're like me and you're an avid PowerPoint user, you may get the instinct to make some adjustment here directly on the slide. For example, if I decided maybe I wanted to adjust this milestone a little bit by moving it to the left or the right, I can go ahead and do that. But you'll notice that a couple things didn't happen that happened in our edit timeline environment. The title didn't go along with it. The date didn't go along with it. And now Office Timeline is even giving me a pop-up to say like, hey, this isn't really a supported layout change. We don't recommend that you make your changes like this. Go ahead and go into Edit Timeline and make those changes, because all of those fancy things that were happening that we were showing in the drag and drop, like the dates moving along with it or milestones that were connected or moving along with it, all of that is made simple for you in Edit Timeline. And in fact, if you do make a bunch of changes here on the slide, when you do go back to Office Timeline, it's going to try and put everything where Office Timeline thinks it belongs. So if you do that and click Save, anything that you might have changed here on the slide is going to pop back. So not recommended. I say forget all about it. Just if you need to make any adjustments to your to your timeline slide, all of that can be found in Edit Timeline or Edit Data. Now, when it comes to styling your timeline, you can select any item here on the slide, for example, like this milestone, and you'll notice this pane on the right-hand side, that's your style pane. That's where you can go and adjust things like the color, the shape, the size, the position, outline, font, all of that really cool stuff, and really get into the nitty-gritty of customizing the look and feel of your timeline. And like I said, it's referential, so anything you click, so if I click a task, the timeline pane, the style pane will change so that I can begin to edit that element. If you don't see your style pane on the right-hand side, you can just go back up here to those 3 areas of use that I mentioned before and, enable the view of the style pane. So going back to our milestone, for example, let's say we go here and I say, hey, you know what? I want all of my milestones to be stars. And I want this milestone to be, let's see, something that'll pop. Let's go with green. Okay, great. Size, let's make them small because I might want to add some more things to this and save some space. And I'm going to keep it above. And the great thing about the style pane is that I don't need to go through and select all of my milestones and take care of this. I can actually go ahead and click apply to all and then decide, apply the shape, the color, the size, the position to all. And then you'll notice that it asks me, do you want to exclude swim lanes? Basically saying, like, do you want all your milestones to take this on, or do you want the ones in your swim lanes to remain as they are? I'm going to go ahead and say exclude swim lanes just so you see what happens, because notice we have this swim lane that's down here in, this milestone that's down here in a swim lane. So we'll see what happens to that one. Go ahead and click apply. Great, took all of my milestones, brought them to the top, turned them green, made them mini, turned them into stars, and it left the milestone that I have down here alone. So that gives me the opportunity, of course, to go down here and, maybe turn this into whichever shape or color that I prefer for this swim lane, like that. And of course, you can style any number of things, the headers for your swim lanes, the subheaders for sub swim lanes, of course, and even your time scale is subject to styling, of course. You can change the shape, color, thickness, all of that good stuff. But you'll notice that you also have the option for the time scale settings, where you can get into a little bit deeper of what the time scale offers. So right now, we have it's showing by months up at the top, and then here that's the settings for that time scale. So it's turned on, the bar color, we have the units in months, we can change the format, so if we wanted like the number for the months or the full word, you can do that. The unit interval is set to automatic, meaning that if I set this time scale to a year, It's going to show me January, February, March in all of the months in order. But if it starts to get larger, you say multiple year, Office Timeline might automatically start to truncate that. So it might go, January, March, May, and skip some months. That's just set here with this automatic, or you can set this manually to whatever you prefer. And of course, you can turn on and on the separators, just a little bit of styling in here too. But I would say most importantly is your ability to turn on multiple tiers. So if I want months, and then let's say, I don't know, quarters, and then maybe years, if it's a very long project, you can turn on 3 different time scales on here, have them all have different settings and units and intervals and colors, and click save. And of course, that will become present in your timeline. Okay, great. So I'd say in a short amount of time, we were able to take a template, a simple timeline template, turn it into a swim lane template, style it the way that we want, make some adjustments, add timescales, and really turn it into a timeline of our own. We'll take a look at a couple more options for creating a timeline, especially looking at, importing your data from a project file and bringing it into Office Timeline. So to start with that, let's start with a simple Excel file, because I would say the first thing you want to do when importing your data into Office Timeline to create a beautiful timeline is to prepare your data and make sure you have everything you need. So jumping into this file here, I'm going to show you this little bit of data, kind of simple. It has the basic building blocks of the data that is needed to create a timeline in Office Timeline. So for example, we have the title of our tasks and milestones. We have a start date and end date, and that is pretty much all you need. If you're wondering, Chris, why do some of these not have start dates? Anything that only has one date is going to be seen as a milestone, and anything, of course, that has a date range will be seen as a task. So this is the most simplest version of the data needed to create a timeline. Just to illustrate how simple this might be, in fact, I can just actually select this data in Excel, hit copy, jump back over to my presentation, and I'm going to go to the new timeline wizard, and this time I'm going to start from scratch, just so you can get a glimpse of what it looks like. Nothing too special going on, right? Because there's nothing here to start with. You're completely starting from blank. In the edit data tab, it's going to start you off with like one row, so you can start typing and adding tasks and milestones. But for this example, I'm just going to delete that row. And then I'm going to use this tiny clipboard icon here in the top right of my screen. I'm going to click that, and that is going to paste that data that I just copied from Excel. I can go look at how it looks over in Edit Timeline. Oop, it's a little bit funny there at the top of my slide. Just go ahead and bring that down and click Create. So in some sense, we have just imported data. The only difference in this case, we've just copied and pasted data. So it's essentially like creating from scratch. So it makes no connection between your slide and the file. But you have Excel data, and just with a quick copy and paste, I've created a timeline. Just to illustrate how simple and easy it can be to create a timeline from some such simple data. And in fact, you can go one step further and just say, oh, I copy and paste, I created the timeline, and I'm short on time and inspiration, so I don't really want to think about the styling. Let me just choose one of the ones that Office Timeline has available for me. Great, looks good, and send, right? So easy peasy, styling, importing, copy pasting. But jumping back to our file here, I want to we'll take a look at a little bit more complex data. In this case, we have the swim lane also available to us. And again, that can be copy pasted. Just do a little trick here just to kind of, again, show you how fast this can be. We're going to start from scratch. I'm going to delete this row. I'm going to paste. Looks good. The swim lanes came in perfectly. Take a look at what it looks like. I think it's pretty settled well on the slide. Click Create, and that'll put it on the slide for us. And I'll mention this again as I show other examples, but when you import data, oftentimes, it gets you maybe 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there. So that's where edit timeline, edit data, and your style pane come in handy. So you can make little adjustments to it so you can make the timeline truly yours and make it look, really great so that you're confident in your presentation. So for example, I'll jump into edit timeline, and maybe I don't love that this date is overlapping into this header, so I can move that there. Maybe I would really like that if these were positioned vertically like this. That gives me the opportunity to make that a little skinnier there. Is there anything else strange and overlapping that I don't like? No, it did a really good job. I can just go ahead and click save. And then, maybe I want to go through like I did in the first example and change different elements, or, like, again, maybe I just want to not think about it. I'm short on time and inspiration. Maybe I'll just choose this one called Vision, click apply, looks good to me, and then we're on to our next timeline. Jumping again over to our data, we'll jump over here to a little bit more complex data. You'll notice that in this case, we have columns titled phase, subphase. We have a column titled title, actual start, and actual end date. So there's that required data that we looked at before. We have a column for percentage complete, and then a couple other columns that we're probably not going to be as relevant to creating an image of this project, right? I do want to point out this column here, titled Sprint. This is just a custom column I've added in so that I can filter this data later in Office Timeline. So, I titled it Sprint. You can title it Exec Review, Q4 Review, whatever you really want. Chris's favorite tasks, maybe. And then you could just put your variable in here so that you can filter later, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So jumping back over to PowerPoint and Office Timeline, I'm going to use that new timeline wizard again. This time I'm going to click Import Data. And then you'll notice that obviously you can choose from where you're going to import the data: Excel, Project, Jira, Smartsheet, etc. It'll also show you a number of your recent files that you've used previously. In this case, I'm just going to select Excel. Now I can browse for or drag my file here, but a couple things to point out is that you can, of course, always navigate to the Learn More and see kind of step-by-step instructions of how to do this. If it's your first time, you can also download an Excel sample. And that will give you, kind of similar to what you're seeing here today, kind of these different worksheets that have the required data to make a timeline so that you can practice your import, or maybe even fill in the template with your own data. And then if you have Expert, there is an Expert template that you can use where you can include plan versus actual in your import. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and browse for my file. Hopefully quickly find my file. Yes, I did. Okay, great. On this first step here of the import wizard, it's just going to be a step-by-step process to import your data into Office Timeline. First thing I'm going to do is select the worksheet. It gives you a glimpse of your data, looks correct, kind of just confirming your header row, looks good. Let's click Next. Okay, great. So Office Timeline is pre-mapping some of these columns for me. It found my task or milestone title, start date, end date, found percentage complete, row ID. It didn't find these columns for phase and subphase, but we kind of know with our human brains that that's supposed to be swim lane and sub-swim lane. So you can just go in here now and manually map these pretty easily. So there we go. Office Timeline knows that that's what we need it to be. And then I can go ahead and click Next. And then here is where you're going to select the rows that you want to bring in and include in your timeline image. You don't need to bring all of them. In fact, if you have a very large data set, 50 or more rows, it is not even recommended that you bring it in with that many. In fact, if you do, you'll get a little window that pops up here or down here that lets you know, like, hey, you should, bring in 50 or less to make your timeline a little bit more efficient and beautiful looking. So you can go through here, you can cherry pick, you can select them all, or you can filter. So I want to point out our filter options up here in the top right. Just give that a click. And you can filter basically by any of the columns that you brought in with your data. So swim lanes, start and end date are popular. But of course, I mentioned earlier that I put in a column just for myself so that I could filter. So I can click that one. Equals, I believe the variable I used was y. And click apply. And then you'll see that that kind of shortens the list, shortens the amount of rows that I have, and then I could select those and import that. Since this isn't an incredibly huge file, I'm just going to go ahead and clear those filters. In fact, I only have 18 rows, so I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with them. Select them all and click import. Okay, great. And yeah, I think it did a really good job right out the gate. But like I mentioned before, sometimes it might get you 80-90% of the way there, and that's where your drag and drop and your style pane come into play. So again, I'm going to go into edit data. Again, I don't really love that this date is overlapping there, so maybe I'll put it here. Again, I kind of like these to go like that, make that skinny like that, kind of like it. If I'm hurting for vertical space, you'll notice that some of these items, like these two milestones, are not in line with each other, but they certainly can be because there's no conflict there. So that saves some space. You'll notice that that kind of shortened everything up there. Taking a look around, see if there's anything else I notice or I dislike or I'm picky about. No, it looks good to me, and then I can just go ahead and click save. So because we only really messed with like the look and feel of our timeline, we don't have to worry about any, misinterpretation between the data and the timeline itself. And the important thing when it comes to importing your data is now you have this link between your timeline and your file, so that as your project changes and gets updated, you can easily update the image in your PowerPoint. So for example, if we remove something completely, let's take a task and remove it, and then maybe move a task out like that, a month out or something like that, and maybe, I don't know, here's another one we're going to delete. That's in our file. We jump back to PowerPoint, and you'll notice that because this timeline is connected to a file, you'll see this refresh data button up here at the top, and you can give that a click. And that will bring you into this kind of like updates wizard where it's going to say, yes, 2 things were deleted, 1 thing was changed. You can kind of go through this and review. Looks good to me. Click refresh. Don't blink or you will miss it. There it goes. You'll see that some of our tasks got deleted, others had their dates adjusted. And so now the timeline is up to date based on what the project data says, and your project data is your source of truth. Just one note here, because it's a common question that we get, is if I make changes here in edit timeline or in edit data, will that affect my Excel spreadsheet? The answer to that is no. It's only a one-way connection, so your file will always be the source of truth. You'll just go to there to make any changes, and of course refresh to bring them into Office Timeline. Okay, great. I did mention that I would come back to talking about planned versus actual, so I want to do that really quick before we wrap up with the demonstration. So I'm going to jump into Edit Timeline really quick. And then I'm going to take a look at those advanced tools again where we looked at dependencies, and then you'll see that planned versus actual is there. I can turn that on, and then you'll notice something kind of happened, that there's this thin gray bar under each of my tasks. That is going to be representative of your baseline or your planned start and end date. And then, this kind of larger part of the taskbar that has like color and styling, that will be what eventually will be the actual. And then, of course, using the drag and drop environment, you can make changes to both the baseline and the actual. And then you'll see that when you do this, that baseline's color is changing. That's due to the conditional formatting. So it's already by default set to green and red, but you can change this in the style pane. So it shows you, if there are any advances or delays in this task. The same goes for milestones. And you'll notice that by default for milestones, it is set to show you the variance as well. So this one is in advance by 10 days. It's highlighted green and it shows you that variance there on the slide, but you can also enable that for tasks as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click save on that really quick so we can see that on our slide. And then if you have plan versus actual enabled, if you select these items, you'll notice that you now have actual and planned in the style pane. This is where you can go to, let's say, enable the variance. So there it is, 20-day advance. And of course, style all of these elements. So you can turn on the variance and change font, color, size, anything you really want. And then on the plan tab, of course, you can turn on and off your baseline, style the baseline, and then of course, style those conditional formatting elements. By default, they're red and green, and it's only on the baseline. But of course, you can add a outline, make the title, change colors, and really get into it wild and change the conditional formatting for planned versus actual. Okay, I'd say that's a pretty good demonstration for a quick start to make sure that you guys are getting off on the correct foot and getting all the features and functions that you're going to need to really get started. So I'll bring us back to our presentation really quick for a little bit of wrap up. Of course, if you have any questions, still feel free to throw those into the Q&A, and myself or my colleagues will respond to you. But while you're thinking of those, I'll go through a couple of resources for us. Just know that we do offer other webinars, one of which is our best practices webinar, so you can go and sign up for that. That one is usually smaller group. We have product experts. You can ask questions that are specific to your timelines, and we can really roll up our sleeves and get into some of these deeper topics and tips and tricks. There's tons of more information on our Expert Plus and Lite on our website. And of course, please check out our knowledge base where we have tons of step-by-step tutorials and videos and everything you need to get started. I also want to mention our beta program that is forthcoming that you have the opportunity to sign up for. We have 2 new products that are going into beta. One is our Office Plan, where you can plan projects directly in Excel. And then one is our Office Flowchart, where now you can easily create flowcharts directly in PowerPoint using the power of Office Timelines technology. So if you're interested in those, all of the information is available on our website. You can sign up for the beta and join early. So a little bit on these. We have the flowcharts, build in minutes, not hours, just very quick. Just think Office Timeline, building timelines, but for beautiful flowcharts and making it easy. And of course, a lot of people do love to work in Excel while they're still kind of building that project data, and the ability to get a visualization of that is I think very valuable for you. So these are the 2 products that are available to us. So feel free to sign up for those when you get a chance, and we will reach out to you with instructions and more information. So finally, I do just want to say thank you all for taking the time for joining the webinar today. I know you guys are very busy. Hopefully we've answered your questions. If you still have some more questions, just feel free to throw them into the Q&A and we will help you out. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.